कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरावनचारि यमुना तीरावनचारि जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की, जगत गुरु श्रीला प्रभुपाद की। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। 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 नारायणं नमस्कृत्य, नारायणं नमस्कृत्य, नरं चैव नरोत्तमं, नरं चैव नरोत्तमं, देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं, देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं, ततो जयमुदीरये, ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु, नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु, नित्यं भागवत सेवया, नित्यं भागवत सेवया, भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके, भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके, भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी, भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। Read this verse, Canto 5, Chapter 12, text number 10, verse number 10. एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुर्बृहद्यं यद्, एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुर्बृहद्यम्, अशच्च सच्चैवम् अजीवमन्यत्, अशच्च सच्चैवम् अजीवमन्यत्, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्। एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुर्बृहद्यद्, एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुर्बृहद्यद्, अशच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, अशच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्। एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुर्बृहद्यद्, एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुर्बृहद्यद्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवम् अन्यत्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवम् अन्यत्, द्रव्यस्वभावश्रय कालकर्म, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्। एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुबृहद्यत्, एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुबृहद्यत्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्। एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुबृहद्यत्, एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुबृहद्यत्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्। एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुबृहद्यत्, एवं कृशं स्थूलम् अनुबृहद्यत्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, असच्च सज्जीवम् अजीवमन्यत्, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, द्रव्यस्वभावाश्रय कालकर्म, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्, नाम्ना जयावेहि कृतं द्वितीयम्। Word to word meaning. एवं, thus, कृशम, skinny or short, Sthulam, fat. Anu, tiny. Brahat, big. Yat, which. Asat, impermanent. Cha, and. Sat, existing. Jivam, the living entities. Ajivam, inanimate, lifeless matter. Anyat, other causes. Dravya, phenomena. Swabhava, nature. Ashaya, disposition. Kala, time. Karma, activities. Namna, only by such names. Ajaya, by material nature. Avehi, you should understand. Kritam, done. Dutiyam, duality. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Since this universe has no real ultimate existence, the things within it, shortness, differences, grossness, skinniness, smallness, bigness, result, cause, living symptoms and materials are all imagined. They are all pots made of the same substance earth, but they are named differently. The differences are characterized by the substance, nature, predisposition, time and activity. You should know that all these are simply mechanical manifestations created by material nature. Purport: the temporary manifestations and varieties within this material world are simply creations of material nature under various circumstances. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah. The actions and reactions carried out by material nature are sometimes accepted as our scientific inventions. Therefore, we want to take credit for them and defy the existence of God. This is defined in Bhagavad Gita 3.27. Ahamkara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. Due to being covered by the illusory external energy, the living entity tries to take credit for the differentiated creations within the material world. Actually, all these are being created automatically by the material force set in motion by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the ultimate cause is the Supreme Person. As stated in Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. He is the cause of all causes, the ultimate cause. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya says, Evam Sarvam Tatha Prakritva Yai Kalpitam Vishnor Anyat. Evam Prakrityadharaha Swayam Ananyadharo Vishnur Eva Ata Sarva Shabdash Chatasmin Eva. Actually, the original cause is Lord Vishnu. But out of ignorance, people think that matter is the cause of everything. Raja Goptashrayo Bhumi Sharnam Cheti Laukikaha Vyavaharo Natat Satyam Tayor Brahmashrayo Vibhu. Things are contemplated on the ephemeral or external platform. But actually, this is not the truth. The actual protector and shelter of everyone is Brahman, the Supreme, not the king. Goptri cha tasya prakritis tasya Vishnu swayam prabhu Tava Goptri tu Prithvi na tvam Gopta Shite Smrita Ata Sarvashrayes Chaiva Gopta cha Harir Ishvara Sarva Shabda Bhideyascha Shabda Vrittir Hi Karanam Sarvantara Sarva Bahir Eka Eva Janardana. The actual protectress is the material nature, but Vishnu is her Lord. He is the Lord of everything. Lord Janardhan is the director both externally and internally. He is the cause of the function of words and what is expressed in all sound. Shiraso dharata yadvat grivayas tadvad evatu ashrayatvam chagoptritvam anyesham upacharatah. Lord Vishnu is the resting place of the entire creation. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. On Brahman, everything is resting. All the universes are resting on the Brahma Jyoti, and all the planets are resting on the universal atmosphere. In each and every planet, there are oceans, hills, states, and kingdoms. And each planet is giving shelter to so many living entities. They are all standing on the earth of feet and legs, torso and shoulders, but actually everything is resting ultimately on the potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is ultimately known as Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Nama Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratushe Nama Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrinda Vaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpataro Bhrishta Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Tanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Nama Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktabinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karuti Vachalam Pangum Langaite Girim Yat Kripatam Ham Bande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwara. Hare Krishna. So today we are discussing this verse from the 12th chapter, and this is in continuation to the teachings of Jad Bharat, the teachings he gave to Maharaj Rahugana. And this verse, if we see it in depth, we'll understand that this is in relation to one verse we discussed previously also in the 11th chapter. Basically, as we all know, in the previous chapter also, Bharat Maharaj gave teachings to Maharaj, Jad Bharat gave teachings to Maharaj Rahugana. And Rahugana had few doubts he could not able to understand, and here he is elaborating on that. And here in this verse he is saying about these 5 material causes. Dravya, Swabhava, Ashaya, Kala, Karma. This is something, these 5 causes which discussed previously as well. That these are the 5 material causes, and everything that we see in this world, everything that is made by the material energy of the Lord, everything that is made by Maya, is actually made of these 5 material causes. We also discussed about the mind in the previous verse, that how the mind is actually the controller of 10 senses that are there. The 5 knowledge acquiring senses and the 5 working senses. And then in corresponding to those senses were the sense objects. And also there was one 11th thing, the 11th function of the mind was the false ego that is there. The false ego which makes us feel that everything that is in connection with our body, that is our own. So these 11 functions of the mind, due to these 5 material causes that are there. What are the 5 material causes? The different objects that are there, the physical objects we see around us. And then the nature of the person that is there. So Swabhava, Dravya was the objects, Swabhava was the nature of the persons we see around us. And third thing was the Ashaya, or the culture or the mind that is there of the person, or in technical detail we discussed the Antakarna that is there. Fourth thing was the time element, the Kala. And fifth thing was Karma. Based on these five different material causes, these 11 functions of the mind that are there, they are transformed into many hundreds and then into thousands, and that's what we see the variety around us. It's just nothing but the transformation of all these different causes that are there, material causes in different varieties in different people. That is what happens. That is how the transformation happens. This was discussed in the previous chapter as well. So now one very important thing that was discussed there was that how these transformations are actually happening. And all these transformations happen by the will of the Lord. This was a very important point we discussed in the previous chapter, that how everything that is happening in the nature, how all the transformation that are happening require the presence of the Lord or require the will of the Lord. As we know in the Brahma Samhita, the verse describing Durga that is given, Shrishti Sthiti Pralaya Sadhana Shakti Reka, that she is the one responsible for the creation. In the material realm, she is the one who is responsible for this creation, the maintenance that is there, the destruction that is there. But then her description given, who is she? She is the external potency of the Lord. She is the external potency who is doing everything this we see in the material world. But how is she doing? Under the will of the Lord. Ichhanurupam api yassa cha cheshtate sa. All that she is doing, all that we are seeing around us, the creation that is happening, the maintenance that is happening, and even the destruction that is happening. It's done by the external potency. Externally, it's seen it's done by Durga Devi, but she is doing this in accordance with the desire of the Supreme Lord, or in accordance with the will of the Supreme Lord. And this is a very important point which we discussed in detail, that how everything that happens, as Prabhupada writes, is nothing else but the actions and reactions of things in this material world. Anything that we see around us, some people take some things for inventions. Like scientists may say so many things, they have invented this device, that machine, XYZ, whatever. But Prabhupada clearly writes in the purport, all these material actions, reactions, they are nothing but the transformations of the material nature, which are taken as scientific inventions, for which they are even given Nobel Prizes and so many things. But they are nothing else but transformation of material nature. And in the previous chapter, one more point that was mentioned is Kshetra Gyato na mitho na swata sivu. Meaning all these transformations, the involvement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always there. Without His involvement, without His presence, nothing can happen. We know in the second canto of Bhagavatam how the creation is described, how different stages of the creation right from Pradhan is described. That Pradhan is the initial unmanifested state of the total material elements. And then what happens is the glance of the Lord happens. In the Vedanta Sutra, that verse comes, Sa Ekshata. Basically, Lord glance on the Pradhan, Lord glance on the total material energy, and then the material modes get agitated. The three modes that are there, the material mode of goodness, passion and ignorance, which are in the unmanifested state, get agitated due to the Lord's glance. And then the further transformations happen, the Mahat Tattva that is created, and then finally the subtle elements are first created, the mind, intelligence, ego, and so on and so forth. And there also it's clearly described that everything that, every step that is happening, every transformation that is happening by the intervention of the Lord, or the Lord's glance is there in every step. And that's what Prabhupada is explaining in this verse. In the purport, Prabhupada explains that everything that is happening in material nature, and so many different references Prabhupada gives about this, different verses, like the Maya Dakshina Prakriti, we have discussed this verse. How everything that is happening is Prakriti is under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord. Without His will, without His Adhyakshata, nothing can happen. It's not, people think that material nature is the cause of everything. Because of the nature's transformation, everything is happening, or matter is creating everything. That's what the philosophy that is given nowadays. But ultimately, without the Lord's intervention, nothing can happen. Ultimately, it's the Lord that is present everywhere, because of which everything is happening. So we see always, like yesterday also we were discussing this in the Prabhupada class, Prabhupada was elaborating on this, how there are always two classes of people. One class of people will always be the devotees. The ones who see this creation and they are able to see the presence of Lord in everything. They are able to see that how something, whatever is happening, or whatever, some miracle or some amazing thing that is happening in the nature, that is due to the presence of the Lord. Because the Lord is there, because the Lord is manifesting, all these amazing things are happening in the material nature. This is the class of people who will see everything in connection or in relation with the Supreme Lord. And then there are the other class of people who will be non-devotees. They also have many different kinds of people, but basically they will never see, they'll see everything, but they'll see everything independently. Or they'll never see that the connection of the material nature in connection with the Supreme Lord. Their vision will be simply limited to how this thing can be used for my enjoyment. Everything that is meant in the world is meant for my own enjoyment, and how I can use this for my own enjoyment. Basically, as Prabhupada explained, everything that is in the world is actually Prakriti. We are Prakriti and we are meant to render service to the Purusha that is there. The only Purusha is the Supreme Lord. But the tendency in the material world is that everyone wants to be Purusha. He was mentioning how even females, ideally we see the male is the Purusha and female is the Prakriti. But in that time in the West, he was telling how females also want to become Purusha. Everyone wants to become Purusha, everyone wants to enjoy. And that is the reason why we are here in this material world, to enjoy separately from the Lord. So this is what is mentioned, that how there will be always this class of people who will always see everything independent of the Supreme Lord, who will always think themselves as the enjoyer. As we say the words, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam Sarva Loko Mahasharam. Says we understand who is the Supreme Lord. He is the Bhokta, or he is the only enjoyer that is there. But then materialists who don't see all this, they see they are the Bhoktas. I am the one meant to enjoy. And how can I enjoy more and more? And they never want to serve, they just want to enjoy. And you see all the different theories that are given, scientific inventions, basically no one ever sees the hand of the Lord. They'll see somehow or other we manipulated this and we have created this. They don't understand that, as Prabhupada very nicely lines this line in the purport, that everything, all these are simply action and reaction. That changes, that action and reaction happens, something gets created and they think, oh, we have created something amazing. This is how they reject the presence of the Lord in everything. Even in the later verses of Bhagavatam, we see many descriptions are given. Like I was reading the description of the different dvipas that are there. We see in the Bhagavatam, like we are in one of the dvipas, that is the Jambu Dvip. But like that, many descriptions of the entire Bhumandala is given elaborately in this canto, 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where it's given about how they are different, there are 7 dvipas, and there are different islands of the dvipas, different varshas on the dvipas, different presiding deities on the dvipas, and many other descriptions of how there are oceans. There are oceans of milk that are there, oceans of clear water that are there, oceans of sugarcane juice that are there, and so many oceans of yogurt that are there. And even for atheists, some description is given that oceans of liquor are also there. So many amazing descriptions are given in the Bhagavatam of different things. But there also Prabhupada was explaining this point, that whenever these descriptions are given, there will be a class of people who will read these descriptions and they'll very easily accept that this is the greatness of the Supreme Lord, the creation of the Supreme Lord, and everything is possible. But then there will be another class of people who will always be doubting. Whenever they'll hear such description, the doubt will be created that is this even possible? What is all this nonsense that what that is written here? I was hearing once in a class, one very senior devotee, he was telling about these descriptions, and he was telling about the glories of Lord Hanuman. He was telling that how Hanuman was searching for Sita all around the country, and then he jumped from India to Lanka just to search for Mother Sita. And he was explaining this to a foreign audience. And somehow there was some person, a non-believer, that was sitting there. And when this was told, he couldn't believe, he couldn't tolerate this. Immediately in the middle of the class, he stood up and he said that, what are you speaking? Is this even possible? Can this happen? Do you think this is practically possible? Now the speaker was pretty clever. So he said that, okay, you think if you cannot do it, so it means it is not possible. You think like that. Now this person's, his ego was touched. He said, no, how do you know? Even I can do it. How can you say I cannot do it? And then the speaker said, if you can do it, then why not Hanuman? He can also do it. So point is that there will always be different classes of people, the classes of people who always see the descriptions in the scriptures and they'll believe that these are happening by the will of the Supreme Lord. The Lord can do anything. And another class of people who will always be doubtful, who will always be thinking that this is not possible, that is not possible, because they have not experienced all this, or this is not in my experience. We have heard that famous story of cobbler and the Brahmana that is there. How Narad Muni went to see, Narad Muni used to go meet Lord Narayan, So once the Brahman that was there, who was nicely following all the rules and regulations, penances, austerities, he asked Narad Muni. He asked Narad Muni to ask the Supreme Lord that when will he get delivered, or when will he get out of this material world. And same request was given to him by a cobbler. A cobbler also requested Narad Muni that please ask about me also, that when will I get delivered. And now when Narad Muni goes to meet Lord Narayan, and he asked about these two people, that what will be the future of these two people and when will they get delivered. And the Lord says a very surprising thing. He says that the Brahmana will take few more lives to get delivered. But this cobbler, he will get delivered immediately. After his life, he'll come back home, back to Godhead. And Narad Muni was confused that how is this possible? Because in general, we see a Brahman maintains Suchi, he maintains all the standards, he follows different austerities, but a cobbler is always in a muchi state, in a dirty state, externally seen. So Narad Muni was confused, and then Lord tells him one thing. Lord tells him that you go back and ask them. You go back and tell them that the Lord was threading an elephant through the eye of a needle. That if they ask what was the Lord doing, describe them like this. And then see their response. So Narad Muni comes back. First he comes back to that Brahmana. And Brahmana asks about that what was the Lord doing, what was the activity of the Lord. And he says that the Lord, he repeats the same thing. That basically Lord was threading a needle through the eye of an elephant. And now this person, even though he may be following rules and regulations, austerities, everything, but he didn't have faith. Immediately when he heard that, he said, this is not possible. What nonsense you are speaking? Tell me the truth or tell me something practical. What happened there? Why are you speaking all this? So basically he couldn't agree. He couldn't accept this fact that this is possible. And that's why Narad Muni understood that why the Lord said that he'll have to wait for few more lifetimes. After that he goes to the cobbler. And he tells him the same thing, that this is what the Lord was doing. And cobbler's reaction was different. Cobbler said, oh, how great my Lord is. How amazing my Lord is, Lord can do anything. And seeing this reaction, Narad Muni understood that this person has faith. Even though externally he may be engaged as a cobbler, but he had that faith in the activities of the Supreme Lord. And this is one very, very important point. We see that how much of our faith we develop in the activities of the Supreme Lord, in whatever descriptions we read in the scriptures, the more we can advance in spiritual life. Externally, we can follow all the rules and regulations. Externally, we can follow the practices. But if we don't get faith in these activities, if we don't get faith in the descriptions that are there in the scriptures, then it becomes very, very difficult to advance. Until, as we say in the Bhagavad Gita, samshayatma vinashyati, that until we have the doubt in the words of the scriptures, in the words of the acharyas, it's very, very difficult to advance in spiritual life. And that we see through this example. And sometimes this question is asked that why so many descriptions are also given in the scriptures? What's the use? Bhagavatam is about pure devotional service. Then why do we need to hear about these oceans and all these things that are there? So one very, very important thing that we have discussed previously also, when we read all these descriptions, when we read so many things that are there around, we understand how great the Lord is. And it's very, very important to understand the greatness of the Lord. When we hear about the descriptions of the Dvipas, the amazing descriptions of the oceans, or the big, big mountains that are there, big, big trees that are there, we get faith in the creation of the Lord, how great the Lord is who has created such an amazing creation. And at the same time, we understand our own humble position. That how we are insignificant in this entire creation that is there. In just the Bhumandala, if we see the description, that is like bewildering, that we are nothing in comparison to what the entire creation is. So when we realize how humble or how insignificant we are and how great the Lord is, that definitely brings out that factor of humility, or we become humble. We realize that how insignificant we are. And also when we read all this, we get more and more knowledge about the creation of the Supreme Lord. We understand how great the creation is. That's why it's very, very important. That's why Prabhupada focused that we should read the entire Bhagavatam in series, in sequence, not jump directly to the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Very, very important to understand all these different aspects of the creation, so that we can first understand who the Supreme Lord is, or what is the position of the Supreme Lord. And then we can come to understand about his internal pastimes or his close pastimes that are there, his confidential pastimes that are there. And that's why it's very, very important to understand these different activities. And also we see here in this verse, he talks about the non-devotees that are there, the people who don't believe in the presence of the Lord. And we see another class of non-devotees that are there. And this is a very, very dangerous class. Or the class in the form of the spiritualists who externally act as spiritualists but garbed. They are in the garb of spiritualists but actually non-devotees, or even worse than that. And they are the Mayavadis. How we see the Mayavadis who externally may appear, as Prabhupada was mentioning yesterday also, they may do many penances, many austerities, and following many rules and regulations. But actually, instead of progressing in spiritual life, making many advancement, they go down and down further in the spiritual life or in the journey of spirituality. And that's why we see Prabhupada paid so much focus on this class of people, the Mayavadis. Prabhupada spoke elaborately about them, explained about them, spoke about them in different classes. First explained their theory that is there, and then the refutations that are there. I was hearing even the pranam mantra of Prabhupada, which he himself gave. Namaste Saraswate Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, Paschat Desha Tarine. His pranam mantra, which was himself given by Prabhupada, that also focuses on this aspect. He focuses about his mission, that he is the disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. What is he doing? Gauravani Pracharine. He is spreading the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is spreading the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then he says, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Desha Tarine. That he is delivering the Western world from the calamity of impersonalism and Shunyavad, voidism. So we see Prabhupada also laid focus on these class of people very much, who is another class of non-devotees and even worse than them. Because externally they pretend as devotees. The example which comes in the Ishopanishad of a cobra having jewels. Like how the cobra which has jewels, it might be very attractive externally. We might get attracted to such a snake. But then if we go near it, what is the result? It will end up biting and we'll die. Similar is this philosophy of Mayavad that is there. Externally, if we try to understand it, it's actually very, very alluring. I was hearing those lectures of Radhika Ramanpuru. I heard the first lecture, and he explained how brilliant the philosophy is. It's actually brilliant. But the same time, it's like this cobra with jewels on it. That we might get allured into it, we might get moved into it, we might feel this is all very convincing, but our spiritual life will completely be destroyed. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Mayavadi bhashya sunde hoye sarvanash. That hearing the Mayavadi bhashya or hearing the theory of impersonalism, a person is completely destroyed. Or his spiritual life is completely destroyed. And that's why so much focus is laid on this. In Prabhupada, in his glorification, when he was writing the Vyas Puja offering for his spiritual master, he wrote one poem which his spiritual master liked a lot. And especially one line in that poem that was very much liked by his own spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which was like this: absolute is sentient, thou hast proved, impersonal calamity thou hast removed. Basically what he meant was absolute is sentient, meaning that it has some emotion, that it is a person who has some emotions, who has some feelings. It's not impersonalist. And then he says, impersonalist calamity thou has removed. He was glorifying his own spiritual master, that how he has removed the impersonal calamity by proving that Lord is a person. Lord is a person with emotions, with feelings. And that's why this focus was given so much. We see the focus on this Mayavad philosophy, or understanding the philosophy. Understanding is very, very important for us, so that we don't also, as devotees, we don't slip into this Mayavad thing. And when I was hearing this lecture, I was actually remembering what Kamal Lochan Prabhu had mentioned when he had come here. He had mentioned that even many devotees, after practicing for many, many years, the doubt comes in them that whether Lord has a form. And this was very surprising, that how can a person practicing spirituality, practicing worshipping the Lord, how can he also get the doubt in the Lord's form? And this is how very, very dangerous this Mayavad is. That's why very, very important to understand what it is, and also what is actually the correct philosophy. Also understanding both of them is very, very important. And Prabhupada says that this is the primary danger for a devotee. If he doesn't understand, we might think we know a lot, but if we don't understand what it is, we might also end up slipping into this. And then I was hearing this Radhika Raman Prabhu was mentioning in that lecture that how this Mayavad philosophy, if you don't know what it is, then it's like it's like someone is participating in Olympics. Someone is participating in some competition, and the worst mistake he can do is he doesn't see what are the opponents. Like we have this in Olympics, different components, 100-meter dash, this and that. The person who wants to participate, who wants to be in that challenge, he always see how strong our opponents are, how strong it is. Similarly, for us as to practice devotional service, to practice the personal form of devotional service, very important to understand the opponent also, that how strong the opponent is and how we can avoid it, or how we can stay as devotees. One of the disciples of Prabhupada, he was mentioning like that. His name was, I think, Hayagriva Prabhu. So he was mentioning right from the start when Prabhupada started preaching in the West. He used to speak elaborately about this Mayavadis, that how these are impersonalist and how they are saying that Lord has no form, they are blaspheming the Lord, this and that. And these people, the devotees that were new, they didn't have any knowledge that time. They didn't understand what this Mayavad is all about. They didn't even know what personalist is all about. Forget about impersonalist. And Prabhupada used to speak strongly about that. And initially they used to feel maybe some class of people that are there in India, and Prabhupada had a huge fight or argument with them. And now he's still angry, so he's speaking a lot about them. But it was only with time they understood that he was referring to them as Mayavadis, that how that Mayavadi is there within every one of us, and how that has to be purified, that has to be corrected. So very important for a devotee to understand what this Mayavad is all about, or what this impersonalist is all about, and then to correct it, or then to see what is right and what is wrong. Understanding this is very important. And also in that lecture he was mentioning that generally as devotees we feel that this is something very stupid. What we have understood, what we have read in the books of Srila Prabhupada, we feel that this is something which is very funny, or we make a caricature, a joke out of this. That how can someone say he's the Supreme Lord? We just make fun out of it. But we don't understand what problem this leads to when we don't understand the things properly. As I mentioned already, we don't understand what the opponent is. And second thing, when we are going out, when we are preaching to someone, as I mentioned previously, the only thing that has to be criticized is the philosophy. But instead of that, we end up criticizing the person. That you are a fool, how can you believe in such a philosophy? Even though they may be speaking something which might make sense according to them. Instead of correcting their philosophy, we end up criticizing the person that is there. And that way we cannot effectively preach to anyone, or we cannot effectively convince anyone unless we criticize the philosophy that is there, unless we point out the points against the philosophy that are there. And second thing he was mentioning is that, as Prabhupada again and again says, this is the final snare of Maya. We take it very lightly, we may take it cheaply, but Prabhupada says that Mayavad, or thinking I am God, is the final snare of Maya. And what it means by final snare, no one will keep. The final snare is always the one that is the most powerful. No one will keep a weak weapon at the last. At the last, like we know the Mahabharata world. In the last, Ashwatthama released the Brahmastra that was there. The most important, the most strongest weapon is kept for the last. Similarly, when we speak of when Prabhupada says this is the final snare of Maya, what he means is that a devotee who has given up everything, who has understood that thing, or who has realized that na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, that I don't want wealth in this world, I don't want high birth, high family, high education, and I don't even want beautiful women, given up everything. Kavitam va jagadish kamaya. Even given up the subtle desires of name, fame, prestige, everything has been given up. But still this allurement remains, and that is Mayavad. And that's why Prabhupada calls the final snare of Maya. That even a person who has given up everything, reached that level, he can also slip unknowingly, unconsciously into this trap of Mayavad that is there. This is the best weapon of Maya that's how he mentioned that this is the best weapon of Maya that is there. And he mentioned that in its best form, if we see this philosophical system that is there, it's also, if we read it in a material level, of course, as spiritualists, we understand it's completely bogus. But on a material level, in an intellectual level, it's one of the best philosophical systems that is there. And Shankaracharya was one of the best philosophers that was there. The brilliant philosopher and the brilliant philosophy that is given. And that is the reason when we talk about Mayavad is all pervasive everywhere. So there is a reason to it. There is a reason that how each and every corner of the globe, in some or the other form, they might realize it or not, but everyone tends to impersonalism, or everyone has those conceptions of impersonalism. Because in one sense we see it also makes a lot of sense. So it becomes very, very important to understand what it is and how to refute it. And we see Mayavad, or this impersonalism, is the default position in this material world. Because that's the reason why we are here. We wanted to become the Lord. We wanted to be the enjoyers. We wanted to replace the Lord. We wanted to have a shot at being the Lord. And that's the reason we are here. And that's why this default position is always there. Unless and until we consciously work on actually serving the Lord, consciously work on becoming the devotees, we will slip default into this impersonalist thing of becoming the Lord, becoming the enjoyer that is there. And in that lecture, he gave many general examples. First of all, he explained with many general examples that forget about the philosophical things that are there. How this Mayavad is very, very pervasive even in the world we see around us. How in the different aspects of the world we see different things that are happening. That also is covered so much with impersonalism. One of the examples he gave is of the automation, which I could very much relate with. That is what is happening in the corporate industry these days. Automating everything. In our company also the focus was automate. Whatever it is, don't do manually, automate everything. Write code, write scripts for automating everything. Basically, what the ultimate goal of this automation is, that how we can automate everything and remove the person that is there. Even the AI and the ML, that's what we see that is going on, the data science. If we see it like in Hindi, we say these people who are working so hard for that. In Hindi, that saying there that apne pair pe kulhari manna. That's what actually these people are doing. They are working for very hard to do all this, work for all this, and ultimately they'll be removed. Because there'll be no need for people then. Automating everything so that automatically everything is managed by machines, and what's the need of people there? 1 or 2 people can manage the entire industry. That's what everything is going, the world is going towards. He was giving another example of smart homes that are there. So there is a concept that is being propagated in the West, the concept that is being brought about of the concept of smart homes. Homes which will have all the facilities. Everything will be AI powered. Everything will have some logic, or everything will have some program so that it can manage it on its own. Like the refrigerators, they will have detectors, they will have sensors to manage things that are there inside. If milk is running out, if vegetables are running out, it can detect. And it can remind the person that this thing is not present. And even better than that, it won't even remind, it will by its code, it will order through Zomato, and that thing will be delivered in the house. Another example he was giving of the doors in that that model that was depicted, the doors of the smart home. As soon as the person will be touching those doors, his temperature would be getting measured. And the temperature would be sent to some central device where he would be told if it's seen that his temperature is rising, the person is not well, that would also be told to him few days in advance. That your temperature is not well, you will fall sick in the next 2 days. So do all the work, all the deadlines that are there, complete it now because you would not be well. And another version, it will automatically order the medicines, prescribe whatever is needed. So automation to such an extent, but we see what is the desire within, or what is the deep-rooted desire that is there. In all this external, it sounds very nice, very, very good, that it's very nice that everything is happening automatically. Then we'll be relieved of so many things that are there. But what's the problem that is there? We are presuming that no person is present. We are completely removing the personal aspect that was there. We are presuming no person is there to check the house, to see the things in the fridge. No person is there to see the health of the person, to touch the person, tell him that, okay, you are not well. And everything is just completely automated. And this he was mentioning is a form of impersonalism in the material world. In our own example, we might not even realize, we might even say that this is very nice, this should be done. But this is also a form of impersonalism, removing the personal aspect that is there, or removing the presence of a person in that entire equation that is there, and just seeing everything being driven by machines. Another example he was giving on a more gross level. the meat eating, the thing we have, the 4 regulative principles. One of them is eating meat. And this also he was mentioning was, if he sees, because this also happens because of depersonalization of things. In our Vedic culture, we are aware everything used to be personalized. The animals were worshipped, the trees were worshipped, different things. Everything was personalized and faces were put on every living entity. But the more and more we see the depersonalization happens, or we forget that there is some person, then the people tend to these things or tend to eating meat, which is a sign of envy towards these entities. He was telling how in the foreign, even in US, where primarily people are meat eaters, but when they hear about someone eating the meat of horse or someone eating the meat of dog, they are not able to tolerate it. And it's a crime in that country to kill a dog or kill a cat or these animals. It's a crime. A person can be imprisoned for that. And the question is that if these people are meat eaters, what's the problem they have with all these things? Because they have a personal relationship. People there, they are fond, the youth they are fond of keeping dogs, keeping the pets in their home. They are fond of riding on a horse. Because they have a personal connection, they can't even imagine that how can someone be so cruel that they can eat these things? They are themselves cruel, eating everything, eating meat, killing so many animals, maintaining slaughterhouses. But because they have a personal relationship with these things, they can't imagine that how can someone eat a horse meat or a dog meat. And even in our own culture, we see in our childhood, like we used to go to different places. We used to go to cow sheds, the gaushalas. We used to see the cows being milked in front of us. We used to buy that. And now that is just a foreign concept. People will laugh that how can someone go there, waste so much time? As we used to in our childhood, I myself remember, we used to stand there for around half an hour. The person is milking the cow, caressing the cow, everything he is doing. And now it's all in packets. And the more and more we remove the personal identity, more and more we don't see that these resources are actually being generated by animals, the more and more we also become impersonalist. We see the resources just at the material nature, just as a place where we can get our resources for our exploitation. But we don't see that there are living entities behind that. Or there are these aspects, the nature that is there is also an energy of the Supreme Lord. It's also one of the things that needs to be respected, or it cannot be exploited like that. We see in many, in our own Vaishnav culture, he was mentioning how everything was treated as a deity. Everything was respected, everything was worshipped, the trees were worshipped, even the rocks that were worshipped, the Govardhan, the Giriraj hill. And this is the biggest antidote to ecological crisis that is there. Worshipping the Giriraj, worshipping the rocks, worshipping the mountain. People nowadays, they are speaking so much about ecological crisis. Harikshit Prabhuji in the class mentioned so much about the environmental degradation that is happening. And the only reason is because we don't see them as some nature, or as we don't put a face on them. But in our own culture, the culture was always there that we have faces on every entity that is there, be it the living entities, the non-living entities. And that's why we treat them with respect. And even if we utilize them, we'll utilize as much as required. Whereas now the concept, now when they come together and talk about environment or protecting environment, the only thing is how we can protect the environment so that we can exploit it for a longer time. That's what they have in mind. There's no concept of worshipping or respecting the environment as such. Only thing that so that we can protect the environment so that we can exploit it more nicely even in the longer run. That's the only concept that is there. But the more we put a face to it, the more we see that these nature, as we worship the different entities like the rivers that are there, we worship them as goddesses, the Ganga, Yamuna, we worship the rocks as Govardhan. The more we put a face to it, the more that mood comes that these are actually entities that are there. They also have a face. They are also the energies of the Supreme Lord. And if we need to use them, we need to use them only as much as is required and not exploit them. And this was the thing he was mentioning, this was the thing which Britishers did. When they saw that these class of people, they are worshipping all these things, they said that these class are low class of people. What they are fools, they are worshipping anything and everything they see and they start worshipping. They are worshipping rocks, they are worshipping trees. And that's what they wanted to convert these people, that they wanted that they need to be given some higher education, that they can have some sense, they can get some nice knowledge and stop worshipping all these entities that are there. And that's why that's why all the idea that has been brought now and all the idea of exploitation that is now happening, the ecological crisis even in India, That is what, because of this intervention that happened, or because of this philosophy that was being introduced by the West, that is there, which we are now studying, now reading and believing also, because of which people are very much hesitant when we speak about all these things of worshipable entities and all. All we see is as a product, all we see, all these resources are meant for an enjoyment. We can't see much more than that. And that's why very nicely Prabhupada writes that all these things, the only solution that is there, only solution to all this crisis, or only solution to impersonalism in all these aspects that are there, is making things personal again, or putting a face, as we talked about the environment, putting a face to each and everything that is there in the material nature. And in that lecture, Prabhuji was nicely giving the example of Srimad Bhagavatam, that how is the example of the prachetas that were there. So prachetas were in the meditation for 10,000 years. And when they came out of the meditation, they saw that the whole world was covered with forest. So many dense trees that were there, and they became so angry. They became so angry and they decided that they'll burn the entire trees that are there. And what happened next? Brahma intervened. Brahma came, and what he said? Brahma asked them to stop this, to avoid this, why they are destroying this. And then he mentioned one more thing. Brahma asked the trees to give their daughter, that was actually the daughter of sage Kandu and Pramalocha, that was inherited because they had left the daughter in the forest, and the forest had taken care of that daughter, and Brahma asked that this daughter should be given marriage to the prachetas. And now when this happens, when the prachetas get married with the daughter, so of course they can't kill their father-in-law now. So that's how he was saying that the personal connection that is there, when the personal connection is created, then of course the person will refrain from exploiting the nature. Exploiting when it comes to meat eating, killing the animals, killing them or destroying the mother nature, anything that is there. If we develop that personal connection, if we develop things with a personal, if we see things with a personal attitude or with a personal form that is there, then we'll refrain from exploiting these things. And as we see in the Bhagavatam very nicely, many places the mother earth is given, like represented in the form of a cow, dharma is represented in form of a bull. Everything is personified. In the pastime of Parikshit Maharaj, we see how he saw the Kali Yuga beating all this, beating the mother earth in the form of cow personified, which can speak, which has feelings, which can speak certain things. So all that personification is just so that we can understand that these are also entities, these are also energies of the Supreme Lord, and we can develop a personal connection with them, rather than being impersonal, or rather than slipping into that impersonal thing, that all these things they are non-living entities, they have no feelings, or they are not meant to be reserved, or they are not meant to be protected. That is the side of impersonalism that is there. So this is how we see multiple aspects in the general world. We see how even a person who is practicing devotion, but even in that he can slip into this impersonalism that is there. And very, very important to understand different aspects. There are many other things also in this, which we'll discuss later on in future sessions. So with this, I would like to pause. And one very important nice statement which he makes is that no one has to work to become an impersonalist. That is our default nature. Default nature in this material world is that we want to become enjoyers. We don't want to see a person, we just want to see enjoyment for ourselves. But to become a personalist, to become a devotee of the Lord, we have to work hard. We have to work hard to worship the Lord, to accept that position that we are servants of the Lord. Actually, that is our default position. Jivera Sarupo Nitya Krishnera Nitya Das. But we have to consciously make an effort to realize that position, or consciously serve the Lord to realize that personalist position. Otherwise, it's but natural. If we don't do that, we will slip into this thing of impersonalism, or slip into this tendency of being an impersonalist. So with this, I would like to pause there. Hare Krishna. Any questions that are there? ठीक है, तो एंड ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।